The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. Fridays here. It's Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Cornhead Lager. We've made it to the end of the week, and I know those weeks after the holiday weekends can sometimes feel like a drag, and for those of us, like Schmidty and myself, that took last Friday off, you turned it into like a 4 or 5 day weekend for yourself. Coming back on Monday and getting back into the grind of the work week can be brutal at times. I don't think it was brutal for us. We had plenty to discuss this week on the show, and we really appreciate everyone tuning in with us this week. And I just do know that can be a tough week to come back from the holiday weekend, especially as you're staring down a couple weeks till media days, still a little bit till football season. But we've made it through. We've made it to Friday. It's Elijah Herbel and Will Wilson with you here on a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. As plenty to get into today. Natural grass field at Memorial Stadium in the works. Some thoughts from Troy Dan and his sit-down with Mitch Sherman of The Athletic a little bit earlier today. And not just the natural grass field, also some thoughts on roster limits, NIL, and the 2023-2024 year as a whole from Troy Dan. And so we'll get into that here in just a little bit. Jacob Padilla, the pride of Hurrdat Sports, going to talk a little basketball with us. We got Nebraska basketball's non-conference schedule. Also going to get some thoughts from Jacob on the week that's been in Husker football. That's all before the pride of Fairbury, Bill Doleman, kicks us off in hour 2 as Bill checks in. I think he's still down in Mississippi. We're going to check in with Bill, get his thoughts. How was the 4th of July for him down south? His thoughts on the week that's been in Nebraska athletics. We'll get his thoughts on the natural grass field likely coming to Memorial Stadium here in a couple of seasons. Then we'll wrap up the show. The imaginary, the legendary Clausborne. All we know is he wears red. He's going to be with us at 5:40 this afternoon to give his thoughts on a litany of topics. We call it the Friday forecast. It's less so during the spring and summer months as there's less to talk about, especially with this upcoming sports weekend. Maybe we'll get his thoughts on the Euros as well. That could be fun. But Clausborne joins us a little bit later here at 5:40. Good to have Will Wilson in studio with me here. He's been with us all week long. One final day with Will. And again, if you want to check out Will's work on The Morning Hookup, you can do that online. You can put it in the YouTube browser, The Morning Hookup. Will and Bill go every single day from our home station here in Lincoln, KFOR. So our local listeners can hear it on the airwaves on KFOR. If you're listening elsewhere, you can find it online. The Morning Hookup is where you search it up on YouTube. Every single Monday through Friday, 10 to 11 a.m. Will, it's good to have you in here. How you doing on a Friday? Looking forward to a hot weekend?
Yeah, looking forward to the hot weekend. I'm very happy it's Friday. It has been a long week filling in on Hail Varsity Radio. It has been boring. It's been dragging, and I cannot wait for this week to end. I'm joking, of course. It's been really fun hanging out with you, Elijah. I always love filling in on Hail Varsity. You guys do a great job. I'm always down to help whenever you need it. I am there for you. You've been there for me. I'm always down to help. So thank God it's Friday. I got some fun plans tonight. My sister is coming into town, so going to see her for a little bit. And, yeah, should be a fun weekend.
Sister's coming into town. Tell Maggie I say hey.
I will.
So that's going to be very, very exciting for you. How are you planning on beating the heat this weekend?
Well, I actually have to bartend every day this weekend. So I'll be in the AC. I won't be in the heat. So it should be good. Don't know how many people are going to be out bar hopping in 100-degree weather. I never put it past people in Lincoln, so I'm sure there will be some customers, but it should be good. Yeah. What about you? How are you beating the heat?
Already have my water in hand.
Yes.
Major key.
I have been. I drank this afternoon.
Start hydrating now.
Yeah.
Especially, I'm going to be out in the heat all day tomorrow.
You're umpiring.
Well, I start the day off, obviously, the Saturday morning edition of Hail Varsity Radio. So if you're listening right now, check out the Saturday morning edition of Hail Varsity Radio tomorrow. That's going to be 7:45 till 9, maybe 9:15 or so, as we'll have your usual Saturday guests on with us. Mark Kranak, Chris Schmidt, myself, all going to be taking you through. So Schmidty makes his return tomorrow morning. Not on the airwaves, but you can catch it on the Hail Varsity YouTube page where we stream live. No commercial breaks on a Saturday morning. Just about an hour and a half of fantastic content to get your weekend started, right? So that's where the day starts. Then I'm on the road. I am immediately headed off to Prague, Nebraska.
Prague.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The mud volleyball tournament down in Prague, benefiting breast cancer research, is going down tomorrow. I have been invited to a team. I'm not sure what all this is going to entail. I've never participated in a mud volleyball tournament before. I hope the water is cool with the weather we have tomorrow. So that's going to be what I'm going to be doing tomorrow during the day. And then tomorrow night we cap it all off with, I believe it might be my last game umpiring of the season.
Oh, that's exciting.
July gets busy. You get into Big Ten Media Days. I know we have area tournaments and state tournament for Legion Baseball coming up. Didn't apply this year. It's a rough time of year for me to try to get in there. Yeah, got to drive out to, I think it's Hastings this year. Could be wrong on that. They move it around. There's a couple different locations, but I think that's where the big tournament is. So wasn't going to make it out there. This may be my last game of the season on Saturday. So we'll see about that. And then Sunday, Rec League softball playoffs roll forward. Really looking forward to that. Our teams really hit their stride. Got some good talent. I think, found a role for myself on the infield. I've been playing right center and right field depending on who is on our team. We have a couple former D1 baseball players on the team, so we throw them in right center and left center whenever they're both in attendance.
Okay.
Whenever they're not, I get moved to right center usually, and the other one plays left center. I never played outfield growing up. Wasn't a great baseball player, for being honest. There's a reason I started umpiring when I did. I quit baseball young, couldn't really hit, couldn't really judge a fly ball, couldn't really field a fly ball. As an infielder, I was all right. Always thought I could be a better pitcher than my coach ever gave me opportunities to do so. Not like I have any hard feelings or anything. But anyway, Rec League softball rolls forward on Sunday. Feeling pretty good about our chances.
So you're going to be in the mud. It's going to be hot.
Yeah.
I wonder if the mud is like hot.
I'm wondering the same thing. Is it going to be like cold hose water that they use to get the mud cool? And then when mud's like a darker color.
Yeah.
So would that pick up the heat well, or would it stay somewhat cool? Or maybe it gets on your body and as it dries, it cools you off. I'm hoping that it's as cool as possible tomorrow, but I know in likelihood, with the excessive heat warning coming Sunday and the fact that we're going to be in triple digits most of the day tomorrow, that I'm likely in for a hot one.
The other thing I was wondering, you're going to be muddy when you're done. You're going to have mud all over you. What do you do to rinse off? I mean, do you just get in the car all muddy and drive home? What's the process?
I've been told they have some showers of sorts there, like hoses just connected up to like little faucets that you can use to shower off. And then I'll probably get home and shower off completely, make sure I'm nice and clean before I head off to the baseball diamond.
Okay, good. Well, please be safe. I know you've been known to have heat exhaustion behind the plate, so please just...
Where are you getting your information from?
You.
Yeah, I know.
I know you brought this up before.
That was an embarrassing experience last year.
It's not embarrassing. It happens.
It was embarrassing because it was like an 80-degree day.
Well, still. Jeff
chimes in here and says the mud pits are already full, Elijah.
Yeah, it sounds like this mud volleyball thing is very popular.
Yeah, there's 80-plus teams, I think, that are signed up this year.
A lot of people in the chat know about it.
Yeah, Broderick here says the Prague mud volleyball is the best in the state. Awesome mud pits. You'll have a great time. Sucks it's going to be so hot for you. So I'm looking forward to this. It's my first time getting out playing mud volleyball. I'll have a report, I'm sure, on Monday on how that goes for me, how the team goes for me. It's a collection of mostly people I don't know. So that's also going to make things interesting. But with my competitive streak, I'd like to at least get a couple wins before the day is over. Let's quickly get to the Hail Varsity Radio starting five here before we talk the shift from artificial field turf at Memorial Stadium to natural grass. That's the point of the offseason we're in. We're talking natural grass versus artificial field turf. It is the news of the day, though.
It's a big deal.
And it is a big change considering how long Nebraska has had the artificial turf. The real Matthew chimes in first. He is first into the Hail Varsity Radio starting five. The other Dave comes in second saying, I'll let somebody else be first. It's a gracious move from Dave there as he comes in second. Justin's in third. Andrew comes in at fourth. And then we also have Crew coming in at fifth. Crew quite excited to be fifth in the Hail Varsity Radio starting five. Coming off the bench, Broderick in at sixth, James 7, Cliff 8. We also have Weston in at 9, and then 10, the back end of the bench, we have Coach Brandon, Jeff 11, KG 12. And let's make sure I don't miss anything. I believe that is the 12 we have into the Hail Varsity Radio starting five. Again, if you want to get yourself into the Hail Varsity Radio starting five, you can do that on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Just search up Hail Varsity at some time between 3:15 and 4-ish. And you can get yourself in there. And even if you don't get into the starting five, it's still a great way to get involved in the stream chat and let us know your thoughts. So the Hail Varsity YouTube page is where you can find that. You can also find the podcast wherever you get podcasts. So search up Hail Varsity Radio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or a couple good places to start if you want to catch the podcast. There you can catch the interviews every single day, some of our favorite segments, as well as the full show. So if you miss anything from the show, you can always catch the full show wherever you get podcasts. And while I'm plugging things, give a follow to the Hail Varsity Twitter page as well, at H Varsity Radio. You can get the show lineup every single day as we start the show, and a clip or two of our favorite segments of the show every single day in 2-minute form. You can catch that. Again, the Hail Varsity YouTube page at H Varsity Radio. Okay, so we go to natural grass at Memorial Stadium. This is the plan according to AD Troy Dannon, as he sat down with Mitch Sherman of The Athletic a little bit earlier today and laid out the plan to go to natural grass within Memorial Stadium. This will come as early as the 2026 season. The school is first going to replace the 2 grass practice fields outside the Osborne Legacy Complex that were installed last year. They're going to do that at some point early next year after this football season completes. It's going to be a natural surface heated from underground, so a little bit more work goes into those practice fields to get them ready to go. They're going to use that as a test through the 2025 season, where they'll likely keep field turf, and then in 2026, or I should say as early as 2026, you're going to be making the flip to natural grass at Memorial Stadium. This has been a big trend, not just in football, but really across a lot of sports, to move away from the artificial turf. Memorial Stadium's had artificial turf in place since the early 1970s. So a long time it's been the artificial AstroTurf, field turf, whatever you want to call it, at Memorial Stadium. They're going to make the flip back. You've seen a lot of stats that will tell you with this new artificial turf, even with a lot of new technology that they put inside, you have a higher occurrence of lower body injuries, specifically ankle and knees. And that's because artificial turf doesn't have the same give that natural grass has, where a cleat will get caught in artificial turf and the first thing that'll rip will be your knee or your ankle, as opposed to the grass. Whereas with natural grass, you get a cleat stuck in, you can get a tuft of grass that will come up. You'll lose your footing, but you'll keep your knees and ankles safe. That has been a trend. I mean, the NFLPA has been pushing for it for years with the artificial field turfs you see in the NFL. They want everybody to be using natural grass because they feel it's safer. The stats say it's safer. Matt Rule at this time last year made the flip to a natural grass practice field for Nebraska because he's under the impression from all his conversations with players, both in college football and the NFL, they prefer the natural grass. They feel it's safer. And because of that, Memorial Stadium will be making the flip here in 2026 to natural grass, keep things safer. And also, one of the big things that can hold you back with natural grass is the cost of upkeep with the fertilizer and the water. And I'm sure there's going to be technology. They have these multi-million-dollar fields across the world where some will be rolled out to other places where you can grow it. Others will have systems of essentially UV light that comes in and helps the grass grow 24 hours a day so you can get it recouped and ready to go. I'm not sure if you've seen Real Madrid Stadium. I don't think we're going to see this at Memorial Stadium, but they actually have an elevator system underneath the field. So in between games, all of the grass will get out of the elements and it will go underground, where they have 8 different layers for different parts of the field, where they will do the management of the grass underground with artificial UV light being brought in. They do all of that in between matches, and then when it's time for a game, they'll use that elevator system to get the grass back up to field level and reinstall it. It's seamless. They invested a whole bunch of money into that. So there's a whole bunch of different technology that teams are using in order to keep their grass pristine. We'll see where Nebraska goes with it, but all we know right now is Nebraska is going to make that flip in 2026, and I think it's going to cost some money. But on the flip side of things, Nebraska's got a lot of money right now, and this is about the safety of the players, which Matt Rule has emphasized time and time again is utmost importance to him at Nebraska.
I think it's awesome. I love the idea. It's like horse racing deserves to be run on dirt, not the artificial turf. Baseball plays on dirt, not turf or whatever. Football deserves to play on grass. I love it. It's natural. To me, football needs to be played this way. And the thing that makes me laugh is we all switched to turf, had it forever. So we started with grass, went to turf, and now going back to grass. It's like, so turf didn't work. Well, the experiment didn't work.
There was a lot more technology that was involved back in the 70s that you could do with artificial turf that grass really couldn't help you with drainage. First off, you didn't have to worry about a field freezing in the wintertime, making it really hard, leading to potentially more injuries. You didn't have to worry about the weather elements of things where whenever it does freeze, you can get some freezing rain that comes down the field. Now the field's a sheet of glass. It's things that you didn't necessarily have to worry about with artificial turf that you did have to worry about with natural grass. But you've seen a whole bunch of developments and technologies where you have underground heating systems where they have the pipes full of warm water underneath the field that keep the field from freezing, keep it growing. You have drainage systems underneath the grass so a field doesn't get waterlogged and muddy. The water drains right through it, and you're able to have a more pristine playing surface. Because of that, you also don't have to have the big hump in the middle of the field that you'll sometimes still see in high school fields that don't have the drainage. You have to have a hump in the middle of the field so the water drains off to each side. All problems you don't deal with nowadays. And now with the advent of these UV lights and UV systems that you can use, you don't have to worry about the lack of sunlight late in a football season. So now your grass ends up dead and gross looking and also not as safe and comfortable to land on. That you have to worry about less. It's just technology's advanced to the place where it makes more sense to use grass again in football because of all the different ways you can keep your grass pristine throughout the year. And that wasn't necessarily possible 50 years ago, but it's possible now.
I hope we figure it out. I don't want to be the school that has crappy grass. You know, we've seen that in the Super Bowl where teams complain about it and all that. I just hope it's perfect.
Or you see that sometimes with the Chiefs where the in between the hashes, the grass gets all gross throughout the year.
Yes.
We'll see what type of system they have. It's tough to do in cold weather, but there's more and more technology to use every single year. It's a Midwestern Dad segment as we talk about grass here on Hail Varsity Radio. Jacob Padilla joins us after the break.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmidty.
Schmidty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Going through a Friday here on Hail Varsity Radio. It's Elijah Herbel and Will Wilson joining you today as Schmidty makes his return tomorrow, has the week off. But we'll be back for a Saturday morning edition tomorrow. We're excited to welcome Jacob Padilla to the show. As Jacob, are you on the road right now? Explain to me what your circumstances are.
I am in Mesa, Arizona, for a basketball tournament. Right now, I just dropped off my team and I'm heading back to the facility for to kind of watch our younger group play.
Tell me about the weather in Mesa right now. How warm are we talking?
Like 115. So not too bad.
Yeah, it's we got warm weather coming here to Lincoln as well this weekend, and we spent a little bit of time discussing ways to beat the heat back in our first segment. Do you have any Jacob Padilla tried and true methods to beat the heat?
Stay inside.
Stay inside.
Pretty much that simple.
That's not bad. It's not bad. It's Jacob Padilla with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Jacob, the other thing we discussed in our first segment, natural grass, artificial field turf. Do you care? It's a pretty Midwestern conversation to have, especially among Midwestern dads, to be talking about the lawn, to be talking about the grass. Do you have a take on Nebraska football Memorial Stadium moving back to grass beginning potentially as early as 2026?
I've never really had any strong take about that conversation. I know there's players at various levels preferred the grass because of some of the studies show that it's the health concerns are slightly less or whatever. So in that regard, I guess I'm all for it. But I know there are drawbacks and advantages to kind of either way to do it, and so I've never really cared one way or the other. But hopefully somebody is enjoying the changeover and make it easier. Maybe keep the team a little bit healthier.
Are you the type of guy that will judge a homeowner based on how their lawn looks?
No, I really don't care. But my coworker Mike Sauter is proud of his lawn tweets that he shares in the group chat, for the lawn pictures. But I'm okay. Mowing was not something I enjoyed growing up, and now that I live in an apartment, I don't have to do it. So I'm all for removing that kind of part of my life. So.
It's Jacob Padilla with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. You can find him on Twitter at Jacob Padilla _ currently down in Mesa, Arizona for some AAU basketball. And Jacob, as we switch gears here and talk a little bit of basketball, I want to get your thoughts. Nebraska basketball releasing their non-conference schedule this season. I think I called it on the air yesterday, a cupcake non-conference schedule that hasn't been necessarily out of the usual for what Fred Hoiberg has scheduled, but I want to get your thoughts. It's a team that I think following Nebraska's run to the NCAA tournament last year, there's some expectations that are on this team. Part of me thinks, if you want to beat the best, you have to early in the season play against the best, test yourself and see where you have to get better. But on the flip side of things, I also see, you know what, you play in the Big Ten, you're going to play the who's who of college basketball every season anyway, and you really don't need to boost your strength of schedule through the non-conference. I want to get your thoughts on Nebraska scheduling what no one would call a premier non-conference slate.
Yeah, I'm one that I don't really care about like gaming the system and setting yourself up. I just want to see good games, and I prefer. I know the fans would like to have at least a few games there on the schedule to get excited about beyond just going out and seeing their team win. Looking at it right now, like the Creighton game is obviously a big one. That's a big opportunity. But outside of that, there's not a ton there that's going to do much for you. So it's outside of racking up the wins. So if this is the kind of non-conference you're going to put together, you just better hope that you do your part and that the conference as a whole kind of does its part as well and lives up to expectations. Because we've seen in the past what happens when Nebraska gets 0 non-conference wins of note and went into a down Big Ten and what that meant. So hopefully we won't see another fourth place finish NIT appearance by Nebraska.
We're talking to Jacob Padilla. You know, Jacob, this is something we've seen a lot from Hoiberg since he got hired, just not a lot of big competition during non-con. Do you think this is something that's going to continue through the years?
Probably. I mean, that just kind of seems to be the method that he takes. And again, when you're in a conference like the Big Ten and continue to expand, adding even more teams in there, that kind of just bakes in a little extra variety than in the past where your conference has typically been you're playing the same teams every year. Now, I mean, you're going to go a few years in between. Like, it's going to be very different year to year. And you're going to be seeing teams that normally you would have played as non-conference teams, like some of these West Coast road trips and all that type of stuff. So that combined with the fact that he does a lot of roster flipping and is heavy on the transfer portal, adding older players, that means you're not going to have them as long. So I think a strong non-conference is probably the path you want to take if you've got a returning team that you really think would be ready to go early on the season and you want to go out and win some of those, like add some of those kind of top-end wins to your resume to shoot for a high seed in the tournament. But if you're kind of a team that you feel like you're going to have some moving pieces early on in the season and you want to figure yourself out, then maybe you don't challenge yourself as much in a non-conference. But that is, I mean, the degree to which Hoiberg is doing it does put a lot on that Creighton game and then the Big Ten schedule as a whole.
Can you compare quickly the non-conference schedules of Nebraska and Creighton? Because Creighton's got some premier teams that they're going up against. They got Kansas, they got Alabama, they got that Players Era Festival down in Las Vegas where I believe the one team they're guaranteed as of right now is Oregon, who has been pretty good in basketball in recent years as well. What do you make of Creighton's non-conference schedule, and how do you compare how Nebraska and Creighton have set up their non-conferences this year?
Yeah, well, I mean, you add in conference play as well and throw UConn into the mix, and I mean, you've got four, I think, I don't really look at early bracketology, but I saw someone mention one where Creighton's got a chance to play like 4 1 or 2 seeds in early season between their conference and non-conference this year. So, yeah, it's very different methods there. Creighton's a team, obviously, you bring in Ryan Kalkbrenner back and kind of building around him. So that's a team where you feel like, hey, even adding in some key pieces and replacing the likes of Baylor Shireman and Trey Alexander, you still confident in your group coming back and kind of owe it to the team and the fan base to go out and challenge yourself in the non-conference. So 2 different paths there. Creighton's we're going to know a lot about just how good Creighton is by the end of their non-conference, whereas Nebraska, kind of like this last year, I think you didn't really know how good they were. The non-conference didn't tell you a ton.
Jacob, as we continue comparing non-conference schedules really fast, would you rather go to Las Vegas for Thanksgiving or would you rather go to Hawaii for Christmas?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that's in terms of just everything outside of the game. The Hawaii is probably a nice trip, and obviously Creighton pulled out of their tropical destination to enter this Players Era festival. But I think the quality of games and the added bonus of participating in this will more having to deal with Vegas over some tropical destination.
Victor Wembanyama this week called Vegas the closest thing we have to a dystopia. Do you agree with that?
I've never been there. It's not a place that I've particularly had a desire to visit. So I respect Victor's take, and I'd probably have one similar if I were to end up there at some point.
Jacob, speaking of Creighton, we saw reports that they might be making this Nebraska men's, women's Creighton-Nebraska games a doubleheader. And what do you think of that? Do you think that has any legs?
Yeah, I mean, they're scheduled on the same day, so it only makes sense to kind of just explore what that would look like in terms of kind of making an event for both fan base teams, the women's and the men's side, and building together. Yep.
Sorry, Jacob, you cut out really fast there, and I thought maybe you'd finished your answer. Do you have anything else you'd like to say there?
No, I'm just if they can make it work. Like the women's team hasn't played in CHI, like they play down in Lincoln, so they're used to playing in some big arenas like that. I think they can make it work. It would be kind of a cool. Just got to figure out the logistics of timing and tickets and all that. But I think I'm all for it if they can figure out a way to make it make sense and just make that kind of a basketball event in the state that day.
Jacob Padilla with us here. Find him on Twitter at @JacobPadilla_. Check out his work with Hurrdat Sports and Hail Varsity down in Mesa, Arizona for an AAU basketball tournament. Jacob always grinding through with basketball, both in season and out of season. I guess there really is no off season with basketball anymore. And Jacob, as we switch gears here, talk a little bit of football briefly before we get you out. Want to get your thoughts on Nebraska. Evan Cooper resigning last week. Matt Rule moves quickly, brings John Butler into the fold. Do you have any thoughts on what that addition means for Nebraska football, specifically in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of whole deal just is another sign of how Matt Rule operates and kind of the high-level organization and all the things that we've seen that kind of give fans a good feeling about Rule as the lead guy in charge of this program, just in the way he runs things. He was prepared. Obviously, this isn't something that like anybody saw coming or was hoping for or anything like that. He was an important part of the staff, but whatever happened, and now you got to move forward. And he certainly moved forward quickly and landed a resume is pretty impressive for John Butler, just what he's done in the pros and just as a kind of teacher of the game. Obviously, Evan Cooper was a huge part of their recruiting, and we'll have to see kind of because Butler hasn't been in college in a decade or so, so recruiting landscape has changed very much since the last time he was there. So we'll see kind of how that whole piece comes together. But in terms of landing a good football coach that has a lot of experience, I think they were fortunate to have someone like him available, and why they moved quickly and landed him, and here he is coming to get to work.
Jacob, last thought here as we get you out, some breaking news in. New York Knicks star Jalen Brunson has agreed to a 4-year, $156 million extension. That's big because if he waited till next offseason, he could have been in line for a 5-year, $269 million deal. Decides to do it this year to give the team a little bit more flexibility. With this in mind, how big of a contender are the Knicks in your eyes? It seems to be between the Knicks, the Celtics, and the 76ers in the East. Where do you think the Knicks factor in there?
A long time for doing all the right things, which is very strange. I'm not used to it. I enjoy being able to make fun of the Knicks more so than treat them as a legitimate playoff contender. But props to them and the way they've kind of built this core around, and they've made it a place where they've got that trust with their star player, and he loves it there. And with the kind of changing CBA and the aprons and all that stuff, like landing a star that's willing and able to do something like that, to turn down that much money to provide more, flexibility for the franchise, like that's huge. And that's a massive kind of competitive advantage over some of the teams they're going to be competing against. So, the Knicks, you got to take them seriously. They're continuing to piece these things together and make moves every offseason to kind of add to this core. And they're definitely going to be a tough out in the East and potentially beyond.
It's Jacob Padilla with us here. Jacob, enjoy your time down in Mesa and good luck.
All right, thanks, guys.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Friday here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're powered by Cornhead Lager, Elijah Herbel and Will Wilson with you on a Friday. We just heard from Jacob Padilla from down in sunny, hot Mesa, Arizona down there, watching some of his AAU kids tear it up on the hardwood. So we really appreciate Jacob checking in with us on a Friday to get some brief basketball thoughts, as we also have some national teams getting geared up for the Paris Olympics this year. I know France and Serbia are battling it out as we speak right now. Two teams I think could be surprises in the Olympics as potential gold medal winners, because you look at France with all that young talent that they have. Wembanyama, I think, is already one of the best in the world. Nikola Jokic with his MVPs. He's a bully down in the post. Two teams I think could surprise people. And I've said this a couple days ago on the show. The United States doesn't really take this seriously. I could see this being a disaster type Olympics for them, because Will's giving me a little smirk in there. I think legitimately the rest of the world is caught up with the United States in basketball.
I mean, even if they have, this is the best U.S. team we've seen in the last two Olympics.
And they've played together for a week and a half.
So has every other team. What?
I mean, I think you could make the argument that a lot of these other teams, they have less of a collection of talent at the top. So a lot of these guys have played together, yes. You have new faces on the U.S. men's national team this year, though, and fewer teams from around the world have that, where it's pretty identical teams to what they fielded in the World Cup just a couple of years ago. Or in the Olympics, I know that was back in 2016 now, but it's to me a little bit different, just with how the other teams across the world operate, especially considering for a lot of guys that aren't playing in the NBA, going and winning the Olympics or winning the FIBA World Cup is their crown jewel moment, and it's not for anyone in the United States.
We have a bench.
You have a bench, but what sets this, or what sets the teams, like say the 92 Dream Team, that 2008 team with Kobe, that 2004 team with Vince Carter, what sets them apart from this team now is you had guys that truly cared. I'm not sure you have guys that truly care on this team.
They wouldn't be doing it. There's a lot of guys on this U.S. team that would not be doing it unless they knew and want to win a gold.
I think they're doing it because they don't want the fans to crucify them for not playing for the country.
They didn't play last year.
What do you mean?
Or last Olympics.
Well, yeah, I'm saying
a lot of them did not play last Olympics.
A lot of them didn't play in the FIBA World Cup as well. And what's the reaction that people get? Like, oh, what are these entitled guys doing, not playing for their country against the rest of the world? I think you have that reaction here. And I'll just be curious to see what the care factor is for this team in the Olympics. I wouldn't be surprised if they aren't the team that gets the gold at the end of it.
We'll see.
As we shift gears here and get back to football, let's talk a little bit of NIL as Troy Dannon sat down with Mitch Sherman. And this story coming out from Mitch Sherman earlier today, as Mitch asked him about that partnership with 1890 Nebraska and the school, which would allow donors to receive benefits for their contributions, similar to how you do with your yearly donations to the university for season tickets and whatnot. The quote from Dannon: regardless of how people view NIL, it is an important part of the athletic scene today. If you do not have a partner in your collective, you're behind, and you're going to continue to fall further behind. With that in mind, you discussed a little bit of that new event that's coming with the Big Red Preview, the team under the lights at Memorial Stadium, one of their first practices of fall camp. As I do some quick math here, Will, how many people do you think are going to show up for this? Because I know there's people that are going to be driving in from across the state to go and see this. They want to see how Matt Rule operates down on the field. They want to see what a Nebraska football practice looks like under Matt Rule. You hear about it a lot. You get some brief glimpses from the media, but it's a little bit different to see it with your own two eyes.
I don't know. I think they'd be lucky to get 500.
You think?
I think they'd be lucky. I think they'd be lucky to get that. Again, this is going to be a half-padded practice. It's not going to be much. And the fact the fact that you're charging $25, it seems kind of steep for what you're going to see.
Well, remember how many people would show up whenever Mike Riley had the open Friday Night Lights camps?
Yes.
half of the lower bowl on one side of the entire lower bowl on one half of the stadium would be full for those Friday Night Lights camps. To go see guys like, remember Micah Parsons?
Yeah.
Whenever he was in Lincoln, he was running routes with the wide receivers, despite the fact that he's pretty much a defensive end / linebacker, and he's dominating everybody. Do you remember how many people would show up to that?
Mm-hmm.
It was ridiculous. We're talking probably 10 to 15,000 people for a high school camp.
Yeah, a lot of students showed up too. They got free pizza, which was enough to show up. Wasn't there one where DJ Cool showed up and did?
You're talking the Boneyard Bash.
That is what I'm thinking of.
Yeah,
yes.
the Boneyard Bash. You have students that show up to that, and that's going to be separate from this, from what I understand. I was thinking if you get 10,000 people there for a Friday Night Lights camp, I wouldn't be surprised to see 20 to 25,000 people there for a practice. As crazy as that sounds.
Okay, maybe my 500 number was
low.
Was pretty low.
It was pretty low.
Still, I still think $25 for what you're going to see is not worth it.
That's fair, but I think knowing it goes... It's a point you made on, was it Tuesday or Wednesday when we discussed this? That knowing it goes to NIL, I think might make people a little bit more willing.
I think so.
Is this your Brandon Baker fund? Is this the money that goes to the 5-star offensive tackle? Like, hey, however much we raise here, that's how much we're giving Brandon Baker. Because you think about it, $25, all proceeds go into $18.90 to fund NIL efforts. If you can get 25,000 people in that stadium, $650,000 we're
It's
talking.
a lot. Yeah. And to us, that's a lot of money, right? It's huge. But to Oregon, it's a small part of what they're paying.
If you missed this report, the reports are out from Oregon that Phil Knight sees the end of the tunnel coming for him, just knowing he's aging. He hasn't seen an Oregon national title in football, and he has apparently given the folks in the Oregon NIL collectives a blank check to make it happen, to make Oregon a national title winner before he passes away.
I'm jealous. I think we're all jealous. That's the dream. That is the dream. And there's nothing wrong with it, by the way, right?
No.
It's totally legal. That is the dream.
I mean,
now, does it work?
That's the question. And that's where I was going to go
and
with this.
Why wouldn't it work?
Because you've seen the blank check type resources that Texas A&M has had with their oil money, and they are going in and getting top 3 recruiting classes every single year under Jimbo Fisher. Did it matter? Nope. Because you're able to bring in the talent. You weren't able to develop that talent, though. And in the SEC, in the Big Ten, that matters.
Yeah.
But they have a guy at Oregon, and Dan Lanning, that has shown he is a football coach. He's willing to develop talent. He's going to take the lines of scrimmage seriously. Oregon with a blank check, I mean, they've done really, really well for themselves in recruiting in the past 20 years.
Yeah.
It started out with the Nike jerseys, Phil Knight saying, hey, let's make Oregon the flashiest team in the country and see what type of talent we can attract. And they felt like a team that was going to be competing for national titles every single year.
Yeah. Do you know...
Now you get blank check NIL with a coach in place that you like? I go, ooh.
Why wouldn't this work? I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out. By the way, does anybody know Warren Buffett's number? Like, can we maybe get him to do something like this?
I'm not sure Warren's the type of donor that's going to be opening up the checkbook.
Yeah, I know. He's smart.
Yeah, he's
not as desperate as Phil Knight, who's, I don't know, dying soon, I guess.
I mean, good for Phil Knight, though. Like, honestly,
yeah.
Good for him. You can't take it with you when you die. You might as well put that money to good use. And if it's Oregon football that brings you happiness, open up the checkbook.
He's never seen one.
Never seen a national title. But that's the type of competition in the NIL world Nebraska's going to have to be dealing with. You have great NIL resources. Tennessee's had great NIL resources. We've seen Missouri. Their NIL stuff has taken off since high school kids can get paid as soon as they commit to Missouri.
Right.
And Drink's also done a great job identifying talent and finding the right guys to pay that money to. Mm-hmm. You have a steep competition, so it's the more I consider this, the more it's good to see 1890 in Nebraska getting innovative with their NIL, trying to raise some more money. We'll wrap up hour one after this.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Wrapping up hour one here at Hail Varsity Radio, we're powered by Cornhead Lager. Elijah Herbel and Will Wilson taking you through the show today. We'll get to Bill Doleman here in just a moment as Bill will join us to kick off hour two. We have plenty of thoughts from Bill Doleman on natural grass, NIL, opening up the practice. I think we'll get back into Mike Gundy a little bit as well, his comments and just all the craziness we saw at Media Days today. We'll ask him about Monty Kiffin, Nebraska football's Hall of Fame class, the 3 guys they're sending off to Big Ten Media Days. Lots and lots of things we can get into with Bill Doleman. Something I've said a couple different weeks a couple different times this week on the show. It's never a dull week in Nebraska football. A lot of times you get to mid-July, you're just like looking ahead to Big Ten Media Days, think nothing's going to happen. Well, there's been plenty to talk about here on the airwaves, and that's been great. We'll have plenty more to talk about tomorrow morning on the Saturday morning edition with Chris Schmidt, Mark Kranak, and myself. 7:45 to 9 a.m. is where you get your weekend started right. Jacob Padilla said the best way to beat the heat is by staying indoors. You can stay indoors. You can watch the Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning edition to kick off your Saturday. If you feel like sleeping in, though, the replay is also going to be available on the Hail Varsity YouTube page as well, so you can catch that at any time this weekend. And we'll have our usual cast of characters on the Saturday morning edition as well. So we can look forward to that. Don't forget, check out the podcast wherever you get podcasts. Just search up Hail Varsity Radio wherever you like to get podcasts, and you can find that and give us a follow on Twitter at HVarsity Radio, at Herbal Essences for myself, and also you can find Will, the man sitting next to me here, at Willie on the Radio. That's where you find Will on Twitter, so give him a follow as well. Before we get out of here this hour, Will, I want to continue this conversation briefly on name, image, and likeness. And it's something we've talked about plenty on this show. I want to get your thoughts from the outside, a different type of perspective, just in terms of how important you think winning in 2024 is going to be in generating NIL funds. Do you think there is that wait-and-see mentality among Husker fans in terms of spending their hard-earned money, not even spending, donating that hard-earned money to Nebraska student athletes in order to field a competitive football team?
I think so. I mean, there's probably already a lot there, but I think just winning brings you to that other level. And, when you're winning, people want to be a part of something cool. They want to be a part of something great. So that's going to already bring a lot of people in to give money. But also, when you see something there, it kind of gets you comfortable with an investment, And
the school, and I used them at the end of last segment as an example. I want to use them again as being the school that kind of shows that proof of concept, Missouri. Missouri is a school that I think in terms of NIL resources, they've done well for themselves, better than a lot of people have thought. And it's because they spend their NIL wisely. They spent their NIL wisely. They developed a good team. It seems like, I should say, they're still spending their NIL wisely. And there was a great recruiting confidential from Kansas City high school coaches where they talked about the people that were coming in. And there were some good thoughts on Matt Rule on that, but the guy that a lot of people were talking about was Drink from Missouri. Just saying that that's a guy that has a plan in place, knows what he wants, is going to come in prepared with that NIL offer to get a guy interested, to show you your place within the program, show you what he wants you to be within his football program. Just a guy that has the utmost trust and confidence in his own plan that he has in place. And that's kind of reminds me of Matt Rule, of being a guy that seems to know what talent he wants, seems to know where he wants to spend his NIL resources, seems to know what he wants to build in a football team in order to build a competitive program. And if you can get those wins, similar to Missouri, I think more and more NIL resources will start flowing in. That'll do it for us here in Hour 1 of Hail Varsity Radio. When we return, we'll get Bill Doleman's take on the past week in Nebraska athletics. That's next on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Cornhead Lager.
He's the pride of Fairbury, an average Joe. Bill Doleman, the professor.
I had a 6 ACT in 1967. One time I got an A and my grandma beat me for cheating.
Now with Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into Hour 2 here of Hail Varsity Radio. We're powered by Cornhead Lager, Elijah Herbel, and Will Wilson in for Chris Schmidt this week, who has the week off on the golf course yet again today. If you follow him on Twitter, and I encourage you to do so, at Schmidt_radio. Plenty of golf content from Schmidty this weekend. Today, swinging away with Nate the Great. Never met Nate the Great, but apparently that was today. Yesterday, he hit the driving range and maybe an 18 with the little guy as well, Carson, and him. Spent some time out in western Nebraska. Wild Horse Golf Club is where he was at. It's just been Schmidty's week of golf. And Bills, we welcome you into the show here. I need to get your reaction to Schmidty breaking his ankle on the golf course, something we talked about a little bit earlier in this week. Don't know how that's even possible. He had the foot hanging out of the golf cart, got it caught in between the cart and a retaining wall. Because we know the guy, it's a comedic way for Schmidty to injure himself.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to smile, but there is an amusement. Everybody's, it's just a golf story, And you see those social media posts of golf carts, gone wrong, and boys will be boys, and guys getting them airborne and flipping them and all that. And I didn't know Chris had it in him to turn golf into a contact sport or derby, but good on him. He did it, and he's persevering through it and still playing. Now, that's going to be one hell of a, I guess, ankles farmers type tan, but nevertheless, he was not going to give up that trip, and he's on it.
Have you seen the video of, that reminds me, Johnny Knoxville in the golf cart in one of the original Jackass movies? Because that's the thought I have in my head of Chris Schmidt getting injured.
Yeah, but that's a movie thing. I mean, guys do that every day on the golf course. I mean, there are so many videos out there of guys wrecking golf carts, doing something that you might have been able to get away with. At some point, we've all been in a golf cart, and we've all tried to, do one of those 360s when it's a little wet on a hill, or try to get it airborne. But, fortunately there weren't cameras around at those times. But, people need to respect the golf cart. Let's face it, injuries do happen.
Speak for yourself. I'm not sure I've ever had dreams of getting airborne on a golf cart. Maybe that's just me.
Oh, come on.
Will?
Yeah.
Have you ever been airborne in a golf cart?
I've never been airborne, but I've fallen out of one a few times, so I see what Bill's saying.
But yeah. No injuries?
No injuries. No.
I mean, look, you try to do donuts in a golf cart. It's not that thrilling, but somebody's going to, fall out. Or something,
Mm-hmm.
You're going to make that turn that you didn't know was there. You go off. Yeah.
So Bill Doleman with us here, a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. The Pride of Fairbury joins us for his usual segment. And Bill, as we transition over here to football, I want to get your thoughts on the 2024 Hall of Fame inductees for the Nebraska Football Hall of Fame. The two I remember specifically, and you could even put Chris Kelsey in here as well. I remember Rex Burkhead and Jared Crick really well. Chris Kelsey is kind of my early Nebraska football fandom days. But you would have memories of Terrell Farley, Tyrone Bird, Kevin Leitner. Do you have memories of those guys? What type of impact they brought to the field? Because they're a little before my time.
Well, even before my time, Monty Johnson. Monty Johnson, I think, was one of the first Huskers that when I was a kid and started following both college and pro football. Monty Johnson, I think, played for the Oakland Raiders. And it was like, oh my gosh, there's a Nebraska guy in the NFL. Him and Mick Tingelhoff. So good on Monty Johnson representing the old school Huskers. Kevin Leitner was a great offensive lineman back in the day, Nebraska guy. Tyrone Bird, solid defensive back in the old Big Eight. And a couple of the other names that you are familiar with. Chris Kelsey was phenomenal. When Nebraska was turning out great defensive ends, Trev Alberts and Grant Wistrom and Broderick Thomas. Just it seemed every year there was a great defensive end that was coming out for the Big Red. Jared Crick had a good NFL career. Rex Burkhead, one of the most beloved Huskers of all time, and certainly had a great career in the NFL. But I want to talk about Terrell Farley. Look, there have been a lot of great defensive players who have come through and worn black shirts. At the aforementioned Kelsey and Wistrom and Broderick and guys like that. I'm not sure there was a more dynamic defensive player in Nebraska football history than Terrell Farley. What he could do to get from A to B and sometimes through traffic was phenomenal. I mean, he was watching a Lawrence Phillips or an Amon Green or Tommy Frazier or, Irving Fryer did on an offensive highlight reel. You could put together a pretty scintillating highlight reel of plays that Terrell Farley made. And I'm not saying that necessarily he did it by assignment. Sometimes I think Terrell just had this athletic instinct that even if he was lined up wrong, he still ended up in the right place. He was one of the most fun defensive players I've ever seen wear a Nebraska uniform. His Husker career, unfortunately, ended a little tumultuously with some legal troubles, and that I think cost Nebraska the Big 12 championship because he didn't play against Texas. But in terms of and you know what, he after his career at Nebraska, he went through some down times, and has really come out on the other side. I know he does radio elsewhere in Lincoln. I saw him downtown one day, and we had a nice conversation. We weren't buddies, but it was just we remembered each other. But I really champion Terrell Farley as a great player, good guy, and a guy that, gone through some stuff and has made life better and is I think a proud Husker and a good Lincolnite. But man, to watch him play, it was spectacular.
We're talking to Bill Doleman. Bill, the biggest news today, grass. Coming
Colorado?
Back to
What?
Close. Grass coming back to Memorial Stadium, taking the turf out. If things go well, they will be bringing grass back to Memorial Stadium. Good to see you again. What do you think of that?
Look, I think that's the trend of football, and I think that over time that they have proven that it's probably a healthier surface to play on. That surprises me a little bit because I think if you've been on one of the very highest of high-end turf fields, I mean, they're relatively soft, but there must be something to it with the injuries. I know they talk about concussions being higher on the field turf than it is on grass. So I think aesthetically, it's a nice move. We're talking about 7-8 games a year on the field. It's not as though it's, going to get worn out week after week after week after week. When you do have a string of home games like Nebraska does this year to open up the season, you might have a little extra care you got to put into it 24 hours a day to get it ready from one Saturday to the next. Because what do they have? 3 or 4 straight home games this year. But it'll be in the fall. It won't be when the weather turns and it'll get bad. So I think aesthetically it'll be nice. People will like it. I know Bill Shepard, the old groundskeeper at Nebraska, he didn't want to have to deal with it. Well, it's a whole new crew now, so they can. And, hey, maybe this will be great class projects for Nebraska's great turf management university program at UNL, right? It's part of the golf management program. Here's what you do. You give students an opportunity. All right, Chet, you have from the 10 to the goal line, this is your final project. Okay, Bruce, from the 10 to the next 20, you got to maintain this, right? And so you got to have a group project maybe that who has the best 10-yard stretch and they get the A or the B, or I'm just trying to think of this academically, right?
Uh-huh.
How can we benefit the students of the UNL? Part of your class project is to help maintain the brand new field or the field at Memorial Stadium. So I think that would be another thing. Partner up with that turf management program. Win-win for everybody. And that's going to get you the AAU status you so desperately covet as the University of Nebraska. There, I just solved it. Jeffrey Gold, just give me a call.
You're a genius.
Yep, AAU status.
That's why we call him the Pride of Fairbury. It's Bill Doleman, genius ideas here on a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And Bill, what I really want them to look into is I want that turf management major to look into what is the best grass for Lincoln, Nebraska. Is it fescue? Is it Kentucky bluegrass? I don't think it would be ryegrass.
Northern California sinsemilla.
Is that an actual grass? Oh, that's a different kind of grass altogether. Okay. Okay.
Caddyshack.
You take it home and get stoned to the bejesus.
Okay, now it comes back to Colorado again. All right, see, it's all full circle right there.
Yeah, get Grant Wistrom on the horn here. It's Bill Doleman with us on a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio, talking a little bit of everything. Natural grass, our topic. DJ chimes in and he says in Nebraska, you got to go with that Kentucky fescue mix. Obviously referring to Kentucky bluegrass and fescue. That's his take. I don't know. I'd love to get the research on this and know what I should be growing in my lawn here in Lincoln, Nebraska. Bill, as we keep it on Husker football here, we'll get to NIL in just a second. I want to get some memories from you. One of the most legendary names in football over the past 40 years. He had a stop just about everywhere, and now I think you can call it a legendary football family. The Kiffins, Monty Kiffin, passing away yesterday. Any stories from his time at Nebraska? I've been seeing a lot of stories from Nebraska media members on Twitter within the past 24 hours and really nationwide of a legend of the game, Monty Kiffin.
No, not so much for me. I met him, I think, once when he came to Lincoln like in an off season and came to the athletic department. I don't even know how many years ago that was. I just remember him being a long time as, assistant coach to Tom. And then I think he went from here to Arkansas or North Carolina State or something. But you're right. He had an incredible career. And wherever he went, Nebraska was always attached to him, I think that's great. He's a Nebraska native, but how good is it that when one of the great minds in college and pro football history always had that Nebraska label with him? I think even when, Lane Kiffin would be rumored for the Nebraska job a half a dozen times, it was always because Dad, one of the great NFL minds, is a Nebraska guy. So, I think even though his time at Nebraska was over, back in the early 80s, that there was still somewhat of an ambassadorship for the state and the program that he carried with him and represented Nebraska well for many, many years. I'm not sure if he's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame as an inductee, but I think he has some type of contributor or merit of excellence type status in there, and good on him. He's been well recognized for what he did to the game and for the game.
We're talking to Bill Doleman. Bill, a few days ago we got word that they're going to be holding a open practice. Well, not open. You have to pay $25 to go. What do you think of this?
Oh, I think Nebraska comes up with, whatever way they can to engage the fans. Look, Fan Day will have tens of thousands of people there. And if people have an opportunity to go to a practice on maybe a cooler Thursday or Friday night, I assume it's before the season starts, they'll do something to where it's fan friendly. It's not just going to be opening up the doors and come in and then usher people out. They'll probably have a drone show, or, they'll test out the tunnel walk and let people do the tunnel walk together. It will be more than just going to watch, guys play pitch and catch and play two-hand touch, right? It's going to be something where people will get their experience money out of it. That's just the way Nebraska does things. And somebody will come up with a creative idea to give people a fan involvement. I think let them do a tunnel walk together, I think that'd be kind of a cool thing, and see what music works best. I don't know. That's another topic. But
Bill, a question I asked to Mike Babcock a little bit earlier the week on Wednesday whenever he sat down with him. Are you worried about Michigan sending any advanced scouts to the Nebraska practice?
I think that guy probably got hired by the Chargers, didn't he?
It's funny.
He's probably in the NFL now.
I haven't heard anything about the guy ever since that happened.
Let's fire up the old Google machine.
Yeah, I mean, I maybe he's driving. Maybe he drove Jim Harbaugh's RV to San Diego. Yeah. I think we'll be okay, and I'm pretty sure, that they won't show their hand.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's gonna be like
pretty safe.
I think it's gonna be a half padded practice or something.
Hey, but going back to the turf thing and having fans in there, one thing that you're probably never going to see again if they go to a grass field is you won't see a volleyball day in Nebraska type thing again. They're not going to want to damage that, or Nebraska's budget for plywood flooring is going to go through the roof. But I would think that they would be very cautious to let people go on the field like that, or a Garth Brooks concert or anything. I think if they're going to go grass, they won't be able to have those big events again.
Good point.
One thing that you can note, though, here, I'm going to go soccer on you. I'm not sure if you remember this. This was probably 15 years ago now. Nebraska was in a potential World Cup bid. Lincoln was included as a potential spot to host a World Cup game, but then Nebraska eventually ended up getting nixed because Nebraska was unwilling to put natural grass on top of field turf, and the World Cup has to be played on natural grass. That is potential events you could bring to Lincoln in terms of events that need to be played on natural grass. There's not many stadiums in the country that hold 90,000 people, and I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there. How would you like to see Uruguay versus Colombia in Lincoln, Nebraska, and the fights that ensue in the stands?
Well, and the Outlaws would probably, be able to host a major event for that too. But something like that would obviously be I think, on the radar. Nebraska always thinks about those kinds of things, and now, granted, we're another 30 years away from being in the World Cup cycle on both the men's and the women's side. But, certainly there's the other major international type sporting events you might be able to entice to come in the meantime.
Bill, can we get 5 minutes on their side? We still have plenty more to get into. We need to get into Andy Staples' Blue Bloods list, some of the reaction to Mike Gundy, Big 12 Media Days, as well as some thoughts on NIL. Can we keep you?
All the time you need.
All right, it's Bill Doleman with us. He continues after the break.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Friday here at Hail Varsity Radio as we spend a little bit more time with Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, and Will Wilson joining you for this Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And Bill, gracious enough to give us just a little bit more of his time, the pride of Fairbury, in his usual spot on a Friday afternoon. And as a reminder, if you were expecting to hear Schmidty, he will be back with us tomorrow morning, the Saturday morning edition of Hail Varsity Radios, whenever Schmidty will return from vacation. But Bill, as we continue on here into another segment, I want to get your thoughts quickly here on some comments that Troy Dannon made to Mitch Sherman today regarding both the importance of NIL and the roster limits that could be coming in college football. He doesn't seem to be too concerned. And we asked about the open practice in order to generate some NIL funds. We talked about how Nebraska is in a bit of an arms race in NIL multiple times in the show, but back last hour is Phil Knight's now going to be setting the standard in the Big Ten, it seems like, with the open check that he is giving to Oregon to go get them a national championship before he eventually passes away. So you have that arms race. You also have the complicating factor of potential roster limits coming to college football. And I want to get your thoughts both on Dannon's response and how you think Nebraska is positioned as we enter this new era of college football.
Well, Nebraska was at the forefront when NIL came into being at the strike of midnight. What was it, 3 years ago now, somewhere in there? Nebraska was ready. 1890 has certainly come on the scene and overwhelmed everybody in Nebraska and is set to take NIL into the future. And is, by all accounts, is one of the model NIL operations in the country. So I think Nebraska is pretty well positioned in that. But yeah, other places are going to catch up. And Phil Knight, there was no secret when NIL came into being that Oregon's checkbook was, or his checkbook was going to be open for Oregon. Same thing happened 20 years ago or so when T. Boone Pickens, the oil man from down south, opened everything up for Oklahoma State. Did that help the Cowboy program? Sure. Did they win a national championship? No. But, every school has, some sugar daddies that are going to, pay whatever they can to try and make sure that they have influence on the program. And it's been no secret that Phil Knight's been doing that at Nike since Michael Jordan laced up his first shoes. And what has it done? It's gotten Oregon to where it's a prominent program, but they haven't been the perennial Pac-2 or 12 or whatever champion. They haven't won a national championship. Yeah, they've got a Heisman or two, but look, money can buy a lot, but there's a lot of other people competing with checkbooks too, just like they are with players on the field. So at some point, somebody's got to come in and not just have roster size and NIL. There has got to be a rule book put in place for these folks to have some parameters that they cannot go beyond. Jay Norvell was talking about it at Mountain West Media Days about how, Kansas State and TCU and some other schools in the Big 12 are trying to poach his players. That would never be allowed in the NFL. I mean, that's tampering with free agency and all those kinds of things. If there's honor among thieves, there it is in the NFL. There have to be parameters that schools are going to live by financially, roster size, all of that at some point. And they're going to have to abide by it. And I don't know how that's going to happen or who's going to make it happen. Nick Saban, I don't know. But, that's NIL as one piece of it. Roster size is another piece. But all these pieces to the puzzle have to come together. And people are going to say, all right, this is the game plan, both on the field and in the boardroom. And we all have to honor it. In the NFL, there's 32 teams. In the Power 2 plus, whatever it is, there's 64 or whatever there is, and it's almost unmanageable.
Mm-hmm. Bill, what did you think of Mike Gundy's comments earlier this week?
Which ones?
Well, both of them.
Well, I'm sure that, he probably pushed the envelope with what he was talking about as player and, his driving. Okay, fine. That made headlines for a little while. What about Colorado being everybody's Super Bowl? If they want to think that too, okay. Look, Mike Gundy is very good for the Big 12 or whatever it is now, and they need personalities. I mean, as far as that is spread out and it's kind of unknown who's in the league, he's as much a point man in that conference as anybody. He's got the personality. He's got the stones and the don't give one. I mean, he's the guy to me in the Big 12. I don't know who else in Big 12 football has the swagger that Mike Gundy does. So he's going to say a lot of things, and they're going to pay attention because nobody else is going to say anything worth much.
Well, do you think, as we saw back, I mean, this is how Mike Gundy really made a name for himself.
Other than Deion, okay? Deion's a separate story, all right?
As we talk Gundy here, though, I mean, everyone remembers back in the day the "I'm a man, I'm 40" speech after his quarterback was kind of getting ran through on the local side of the media. Everyone was having a story about how bad this quarterback was in some game. I don't even remember what it is. And that's kind of the point I'm getting at here is Mike Gundy goes and steals the headlines by going on a tirade at a press conference, and suddenly no one's talking about the quarterback. Everyone's talking about Gundy now. Kind of a similar story here with Ollie Gordon, the running back, gets the DUI, and then Mike Gundy says some crazy things at media days, and now everyone's talking about Mike Gundy. Do you think this is just all a part of his plan to take some pressure off of his running back that made a mistake, and he's making him live for that mistake, making him go stand up there in front of media days and field questions, but still no one's talking about what Ollie Gordon said at media days. They're talking about what Mike Gundy said at media days. That's just, how their relationship and whatever the punishment was and all that. And I understand what he was doing, like saying, you got to face the consequences and answer the questions. But, a good coach, I think in terms of the coach-player relationship, that's what he's doing, is he's protecting his player to a certain extent. Go take the heat, but I'll take more. And you and I will work it out when we get back to Stillwater. And I think that's probably something that is more, it's also sending a message to the locker room. I'm the boss. Don't screw up. I'll take the heat, but it's going to be between you and me and how this thing is adjudicated. It's Bill Doleman with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Bill, one last discussion point for you here is we've hit a little bit of everything, a busy week of Husker news this week. We still haven't hit Evan Cooper and John Butler. I guess quickly, do you have any thoughts on how Matt Rule handled that? We're going to get to Andy Staples' Blue Bloods in just a moment as well, but Evan Cooper resigns last Friday. Haven't got a chance to talk to you since then. Matt Rule moves quickly, gets John Butler in-house. A thought on Matt Rule having a plan in place and getting the replacement done quickly?
Yeah, did he handle it quickly, or did he handle it over time and when he needed to make the announcement? That's what I mean. To me, this thing has been in the works for a long time. I don't think that this was handled quickly. It was announced quickly. I think Matt Rule has been working on it for a while. And I think, maybe you look at John Butler's resume and you're anticipating I may have to have a defensive coordinator next year, and I have somebody on staff who has already been a defensive coordinator. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe this is even a longer range plan that he enticed John Butler to join the staff. But yeah, but credit him that this did not linger. This wasn't nearly as long as the search for him, 40 days or whatever it was. So I think it goes to his organizational understanding of how he needs to operate, and good on him. Nice job by Matt Rule, and it looks like he got a solid hire.
Bill, we'll get more of your thoughts on that situation on the next episode of the Average Joe Sports Show, which we should be recording here soon as Schmidty returns from vacation. So that show should be posted up here in the near future. So we'll get more thoughts on that situation there. But where I want to get you out is with Andy Staples, his Blue Blood list. We haven't spent much time on this week on the show because, simply put, I don't care enough to really discuss it all that much. People are going to have overreactions. I think you look at the past 10 years of Nebraska football and you say, man, if you don't think Nebraska's a blue blood anymore, I think I disagree, but I think you have the right to what is a valid opinion in my mind, because Nebraska hasn't lived up to blue blood status in the past 10 years. But Andy Staples, his blue blood list: Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Michigan, Georgia, Notre Dame, Texas, USC, and Penn State. That is the blue bloods of college football, according to Andy Staples. He puts Nebraska's in his contenders list, along with teams such as Tennessee, Oregon, Florida, Miami, LSU, Florida State, Clemson. So that's kind of the tier that he has Nebraska on right now. Do you have a thought on this? Do you think it's just more off-season fodder? What's your take on Andy Staples not including Nebraska as a blue blood?
Yeah, first of all, it's off-season fodder. It is clickbait. It is how can I get somebody to read my stuff? I know. Let's do something a little controversial with Nebraska, because I know Nebraska fans will flood my Twitter feed, my Instagram feed. They will read it. Remember last year, ESPN had one, who's the best coach in college football? And I think it came down to Nick Saban and Matt Rule. Every year, who's the best team in college football history? 95 Nebraska. You know, there's something somebody does because they know I'll get attention if I just put Nebraska in there somehow, which means Nebraska is a blue blood. Blue blood means historic. That means going back decades and century. That's how you are a blue blood program. What has Penn State done? They've got some nice wins. They've had some nice seasons, but they haven't sniffed a national championship in the last decade. USC's been on an up and down with Clay Helton and Lincoln Riley last year. Okay, they were blue when, Pete Carroll and Leinart and all those guys were reading the rule book in gray, and then he hightails it to Seattle. So they've had some good I'll give them that. But if you want blue blood, that is historic. That's not trendy. Okay? That's trendy. And Nebraska doesn't trend. They're trending down, but Nebraska's tradition. Blue bloods have to do with tradition. This was a clickbait article for people to have some fodder on sports talk and for Nebraska fans to fire up the old Twitter X and do all the fact checking and put all the numbers out there. And the fact that people talk about Nebraska in the offseason, the 61 consecutive seasons of off-season national championships, Nebraska is flat out a blue blood program. And nobody's been better this offseason, once again, than Nebraska.
And Bill, to your point, Staples, the tweet link in his article, 2.6 million views on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it.
See you in August, Andy.
It's Bill Doleman with us here, a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. Bill, appreciate you sitting down for an extended chat, and we'll get caught up with the next Average Joe Sports Show, and we'll also get caught up with you next Friday, all right?
All right, always good to be with you guys. Elijah, see you later. Waz and Waz Jr., best to your dad, Will.
You got it, man.
There he goes. It's Bill Doleman with us, a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. As if you catch anything from an extended chat, 2 full segments with Bill, you can check it out in podcast form wherever you get podcasts. To search up Hail Varsity Radio, and that will be posted shortly following the conclusion of the show. When we return, we're going to get caught up with the imaginary, legendary Clausborne. All we really know about him is that he wears red. We're going to get his take on some of the biggest Nebraska and college football stories of the week. That's coming your way after the break right here on Hail Varsity Radio.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Getting close to the end of a Friday here on Hail Varsity Radio. We are powered by Cornhead Logger, Elijah Herbel, joined today by Will Wilson in studio filling in for Chris Schmidt. And as we wrap up a Friday, it's time for a Friday tradition like no other. We welcome the legendary, the imaginary Clausborne to the show. All we know is that he really wears red. That's about all the publicly available information there is out there about this man. And Claus, it's good to have you today. I've been told through the grapevine, sources are saying that Claus has begun a new workout regimen. How's that going, and how are you doing today?
Well, first of all, I'm doing okay, and I don't believe I've met Mr. Wilson, so I just want to give a hearty hi-de-ho there, neighbor.
Thank you, Claus. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. And the rumors you've heard are true. I did start a new workout, and I'll give you boys the secret. It starts out with 3 sets of 10 lip smacks, 4 sets of 7 tongue darts, and then finish up with 3 sets of 10 squints into the sun while wondering what the heck the Peter brothers are doing. So I think you guys can probably get started on that. Don't worry if you struggle at first. It took me nearly 25 years to get it right.
That sounds like a difficult workout regimen, Claus, but I'm sure you're seeing the results.
Oh, we're out here getting gains, fellas. Always getting gains.
It's Clausborne with us here on a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And Claus, I want to start this off here by Sending our love out to Chris Schmidt. He's got the week off. It was a golf cart accident for Chris Schmidt today. He was hanging that left ankle out the golf cart, got it caught in between a retaining wall and his golf cart, and he broke his ankle in the process. I'm not sure. Have you heard about this yet?
Well, if I would have ever expected to get Christopher to get an athletic injury, which I definitely would not have, I would have probably bet on it being some sort of country club injury. Although I do wish him well, and hopefully when he's done, he can rub a little ointment on it and get back in the game.
Clausborne, the biggest news from today, if everything goes right, grass will be coming back to Memorial Stadium, taking the turf out and putting grass back in. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm sure our resident Colorado traveler, Elijah, got really excited when he heard the words grass coming to Nebraska, but it's not that kind of grass. And in fact, I did reach out to some former players to see what their thoughts were on turf versus grass. And I got in touch with former Denver Bronco Randy Gregory, who said, I don't know, I've never smoked turf. So...
Wow.
Oh, man. That's a soundbite. It's Claus with us here. Claus, any other thoughts, or was any other players you talked to, or just Randy?
Really, he was the only one that was willing to talk, though I suspect about 80% of the players had an opinion on it.
It's Clausborne with us here on a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And Claus, let's switch gears here and talk some actual football. Well, as close as you can get to actual footballs. We had some media days going down this week. One of the more interesting ones I think you'll probably have an opinion on is the alcohol influence that we had on Pac-12, maybe Pac-2 media days. It was a bit of a Pac-2 after dark with the panel, and the comment was, there will be an open bar for Pac-2 media days, because if anyone deserves to drink after the past year, it is the Pac-2. Your reaction?
Well, if you're living in Corvallis, Oregon, or in Pullman, Washington, you needed a drink anyway, but the year they had, certainly losing all of their conference mates and having to go through all that rigmarole was tough. Although, as I understand, that was just really a hidden signal to suggest that they are now going to be offering Oklahoma State as their new expansion target.
Well, Clausborne, let's go right there. Apparently, Gundy was maybe admitting to drunk driving during the Big 12 media days.
Well, frankly, that's not a good thing to admit in public, but let's be honest. He lives in Stillwater, Oklahoma, which is pretty good ways from anything else, and just look at his haircut. Are we really surprised?
No, not really. You're right.
The only thing about that would surprise me is if he wasn't doing that behind the wheel of an 88 IROC Camaro, so that was probably the only shocking thing.
Claus, as we're talking driving, potentially being behind the wheel after a couple of beers, as Gundy said, putting you on the spot here a little bit, Georgia in the line of fire again, as they had 2 more players arrested this week for reckless driving. I think it kind of checks out as you're putting players behind the wheel of these nice sports cars they're getting as a part of an NIL deal, and Georgia yet again finds themselves with players getting arrested for driving recklessly, driving too fast. Any thoughts?
Well, the good book says, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. And since I understand most people are too young, according to Iowa fans, to remember the 90s anyway, allow me to cast a stone. Georgia needs to really start policing things, or only let their players drive on that speedway just north of town.
We're talking to Clausborne. Claus, Shedeur Sanders. So, apparently he's saying that everyone treats Colorado like their Super Bowl. Do you agree with that?
And not only that, he said yesterday that he considers himself more grounded now, which Will and I had a good laugh about yesterday on the show.
More grounded, and yet Colorado is everybody's Super Bowl. No, Shedeur, they just play hard against Colorado because that's what athletes in Division I do. I feel like that sentiment has the same energy as Christopher thinking the waitresses at the Hooters are his friends. So.
Oh, nice.
That's a strike. He's not even here to defend himself.
That's the best time to do it, when he expects it the least.
It's Clausborne with us here on a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And Claus, as we let you ride off into the sunset here, any big plans for your weekend here in the capital city? It's going to be a hot one with heat indexes expected at near 110 degrees. And we have a excessive heat warning in effect. Just want to know if you have any plans for the weekend or if you have any advice to the Lincolnites who are going to be trying to find ways to beat the heat this weekend.
Well, as I mentioned before, I've gotten more into working out and finding a gym, and I think those places that do the infrared saunas probably not going to have a whole lot of business this weekend when you can just simply walk outside, stand, and chase all the fans off of their yard. So I'll probably just go drown a worm and maybe jump in with a couple beverages myself.
There he is. It's Clausborne with us, the Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And Claus, we'll let you get out. Appreciate you taking some time out of your Friday, and we'll get caught up with another edition of the Friday Forecast next week.
Okay.
There he goes. The imaginary, the legendary Clausborne. All we really know about him is that he wears red, and you can hear the excitement in his voice as we start talking some real football with Media Days. Good to get caught up with Claus. We'll wrap up a Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio after the break. As always, we are powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time here on a Friday, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We are powered by your friends over at Cornhead Lager, and I will say, looks like a beautiful weekend for a Cornhead Lager or 6. Maybe not a beautiful weekend in terms of the weather that we're getting, but in terms of an opportunity to cool off. I think it's a great weekend. Crack yourself a beer and a Cornhead Lager is a great opportunity. We thank them for their support of Hail Varsity Radio. It's Elijah Herbel and Will Wilson taking you through the last few minutes of this Friday show. And Will, I'm not going to lie to you. I have nothing planned for this final segment. I was hoping the conversation would take us somewhere. Instead, I'm just going to do the stream of consciousness thing until a topic comes to mind. I'm thinking about my weekend. I'm thinking about mud volleyball. We've already kind of laid that out enough. That's going to be down in Prague, benefiting breast cancer research. I'm really looking forward to that. Going to get out on the baseball diamond. My softball team gets it rolling. Really a full weekend. Do you have any plans to watch Copa America and the Euro finals on Sunday?
Maybe I'll be working happy hour, so I might throw it on the TV. I don't know. Usually we put golf on, watch the end of the golf tournament, and after that it's pretty much fair game. I might be selfish, put the Royals on, but maybe.
Do you have any action on Bobby Witt to win the home run derby? Are you playing anything down?
I don't. Nope. I'm sticking my money to Saratoga this weekend.
Oh, there's a good topic. Will, I know you dive into the ponies just a little bit. For the folks at home, Danny's not a big horse racing guy, so we didn't get into this into the Friday forecast yesterday. Do you have any locks of the weekend for Saratoga? And it's always dangerous to say locks with horse racing, but I think it's more fun to say it that way. Do you have any insight you'd like to give out to the good folks here listening to Hail Varsity Radio?
I really don't. I don't really look ahead. I look kind of race by race, so I don't really have any locks, if you will. I do have a handicapping tournament I'm playing in on Saturday. That's at a different track, so wish me luck on that. Justin wants to know where I bartend. I bartend down at Tavern on the Square, down in the Haymarket, so I'll be there during the day on Saturday and Sunday. So that reminds me, you need a topic. We were going to discuss, it's going to be hot this weekend. What's the best alcoholic beverage during a heat wave? When you're in the sweltering heat, what's the best alcoholic beverage? My two, I think a Moscow Mule is really good in the heat, and a mojito.
Mojito's a good one. How did you feel about the simple, the standard, the classic John Daly?
Well, anything with lemonade.
Lemonade
really
iced tea and a little bit of vodka in there seems like a refreshing summer drink.
Yeah. I saw somebody in the chat say vodka lemonade is a great summer drink. Can't go wrong with the twisted teas. Those always go down pretty well.
They do. They give me heartburn, though, if I have one too many. They have so much sweetness in them.
Yeah, they do.
The sugar kind of gets me.
Mm-hmm.
Is a margarita too basic to say?
I don't think so.
Margarita could be a good summer drink as well. And again, as I said to lead off this segment, you can't go wrong with a beer, specifically a Cornhead lager. I think beer in the summertime is one of God's gifts to earth.
Nelly chimes in. I think he said G&T. I think that's gin and tonic.
Gin and tonic, yeah.
Yeah, that could be refreshing. So, yeah.
The problem is, in a weekend like this, I do encourage, if you're planning on beating the heat through a couple alcoholic beverages, I will say, stay hydrated.
Stay hydrated.
Keep yourself healthy.
Yes.
No hospital visits this weekend. I know, I don't think either of us are going to be getting after it this weekend, truly. We'll save that for football season. I need to make it out to a Broncos game this year, and maybe I'll get after it in that way. But, yeah, keep yourself safe this weekend. Make sure to find yourself air conditioning when you can if you're going to be out in the heat. Be drinking some water because it's going to be a dangerous one this weekend in the capital city. That'll do it for us here on a Friday. Catch us with the Saturday morning edition tomorrow morning, streaming online, the Hail Varsity YouTube page, 7:45 to 9. That's when we'll talk to you again.